In a shocking turn of events, ICE conducted its biggest raid ever for a sanctuary city.
Meanwhile, in Boulder, Colorado, we apparently find a sanctuary city for anti-Semitic terrorists.
Artificial intelligence is all the rage right now, but one of our guests warns that it could usher in communism.
Always remember to read the terms of agreement before you download an app. The Marxism is in the details.
And not every NFL team is gay for Pride Month, just some of them.
Spoiler alert, I'm not very proud of my favorite franchise.
Nor should you be. Blaze News, The Mandate starts right now. Good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Blaze News editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson.
Life is good. I think despite our opening, we're seeing a lot less crazy ideology this month in June than we did last year.
Absolutely. I mean, you'll still see plenty of pride flags that are out in Boston, but you're also going to see fewer illegals there after ICE conducted its biggest raid ever. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons gave some raw numbers during a press conference earlier today.
These brave men and women have worked tirelessly to arrest approximately 1,500 criminal aliens and illegal aliens during Operation Patriot. In the beginning of May, ICE and its federal and state partners launched the whole-of-government effort to remove dangerous criminal aliens from all over the Commonwealth.
Andrew Arthur is a former federal immigration judge and resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. So, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us here tonight. So, this raid, obviously, it's a pretty big win for the Trump administration, but where does it all go from here?
So this is part of a much larger plan by the Trump administration and border czar Tom Homan to first get criminal aliens off the street and then encourage other aliens whose only crime was entering the United States illegally, which is a pretty significant crime, to leave the United States voluntarily. But with respect to the criminal aliens, keep in mind, Joe, that every one of these criminals that was apprehended by Todd Lyons and ICE officers as part of Operation Patriot is a person who was likely known to the Biden administration. Very few of these people, committed their crimes or were convicted of their crimes, just since January 20th. These are individuals who are allowed to live in the sanctuary state of Massachusetts for weeks, months, or years and continue to prey upon the local population, including almost exclusively on the immigrant population that the politicians in those areas claim to care so much for. So, Tom Homan, Donald Trump, Todd Lyons, they're taking efforts to actually make those communities safer and to make our streets safer.
Art, given what we saw this weekend in Massachusetts, and given what you've seen throughout the country with these states and cities and their initial reaction, which is certainly negative in many of these places, to the Trump administration, how much leeway do they have? Like, how do you think this plays out to push back?
Operations like this? Yeah, when it comes to operations like this, they actually have very little leeway. If they attempt to interfere with federal enforcement operations, that's a federal crime. Now, if they simply, tell the locals, what their rights are, if ICE comes to them, it's probably, perfectly within their rights. But the only reason that ICE has had to take this action in Massachusetts is because Massachusetts won't let ICE officers into the safe confines of the local jails. That's where, when I started my career almost 33 years ago in San Francisco, of all places, the then INS was allowed to go through, identify criminal aliens, take them into custody, and get them off the street. Now, our officers are having to put themselves into danger by going into the community and finding these individuals. Hopefully, Matt, these communities will realize the frivolity of their ways and will come around. But until that happens, ICE is going to keep operating, and it's going to send signals to places like Massachusetts that deem themselves sanctuaries.
Let's go out to Boulder, Colorado. Everybody knows about the anti-Semitic attack that happened over the weekend. Of course, he was here illegally and 8 people were injured. Let's go ahead and listen to Glenn Beck earlier today.
A man, not a citizen. I want to make that clear. Not a citizen. Not even a guest of our country anymore. An illegal immigrant whose visa had expired not once, but 2 times. Why was he here? How many more like him are here, hiding in plain sight, walking amongst us?
All right, that's what I want to dive in here with you. How many are there actually hiding in plain sight, like Glenn just mentioned there?
So when you're talking about the the unauthorized population, as they refer to it as a whole, the center conservatively estimates that it's about 15.5 million people. It could be higher. In fact, it's probably a lot higher, but we base that on the Census Bureau's community survey. But, when you talk about visa overstays like this, back in 2015, then Senator Marco Rubio estimated that about 40% of the unauthorized population here were people who had been admitted to this country as non-immigrants who promised that they're going to leave at a time certain and go back to their homes abroad, who didn't. And this really is the part of the migrant crisis that festered under Biden. That we don't talk about. We talk about, the people who poured illegally over the border, but we don't talk about all those people who were rubber stamped at visa offices abroad, allowed to come to this country, who just didn't leave. So, it's a significant problem. We could be talking about anywhere between 4 and 6 million visa overstays like Mr. Solomon. This is a real problem, especially since, one, we let them in, we were at least hospitable to them, and then they didn't comply with our rules. Part of the Trump administration's plan is to go after those individuals too. Every alien who's present in the United States, legally or illegally, is going to have to register. Secretary Noem announced that a few months ago. If they don't, they're committing another crime. But if they do, we're going to know where they are, and we can go and take action against them before another tragedy like this can happen again.
So when it comes to the practical side of this, obviously we have lots of federal judges who are obstructing what the president is trying to do, what the administration is trying to do. And there's discussion about just practically, right, how to make this happen. If it's possible to change the system, if it's possible to change the policy and actually, put all these people through the system in some way. Do you have any thoughts about that? First the federal judges, and then practically how this ought to be done en masse, especially given the state, the ideological state, I guess, of so many judges, both immigration and federal.
Yeah, and Matt, when you talk about the federal judges, some of the biggest abuses have largely gone unnoticed. The district court in Maryland, for example, issued a standing order that gives a stay to every alien facing removal who files a habeas, even though most of those individuals are by statute not eligible for habeas. But, I think it's time for the Supreme Court, if it's going to continue the credibility of the federal courts, to rein in those district court judges. Otherwise, much like most of the media and a lot of academia, in their zeal to, fight Trump or resist Trump, they're going to undermine their own credibility. But with respect to the immigration system itself, we have about 700 immigration judges. President Trump and the big, beautiful bill is going to get a whole lot more money for more judges to speed that process along. But the Trump administration is also using some very inventive tools to address that. We've seen that individuals who were waved in through the ports of entry and paroled into this country are now being taken into custody when they show up in immigration court, and they're subjected to something called expedited removal, which is much quicker than going to removal court. But we also see, various efforts by DHS Secretary Noem, Tom Homan, to encourage those people to leave illegally, or to leave now while they still can, before they have to be taken into custody, before we have family separation, before any of that happens. And paying people $4,500 may seem a bit excessive, or paying them $1,000 may seem excessive and getting them a $3,500 plane ticket, but it's a lot cheaper than the $17,100 that each deportation costs from beginning to end. So, the Trump administration is thinking outside the box. They know they've got a problem, and they're using every shot in their locker and every tool in the toolbox to address it.
It's fascinating to have you on. We've talked with other people about the habeas corpus issue and the idea that, really doing this would just drown out the system. What are your thoughts specifically about that?
So Congress in 1996 and 2005 strictly limited the availability of habeas to aliens who were facing removal from the United States. And really what we're waiting for is, one superior court, be it the circuit court or the Supreme Court, to step in and actually, enforce those boundaries that Congress put on. It put those boundaries on for exactly this reason. Congress doesn't want district court judges being star chambers at which, one judge sitting in, San Francisco or Baltimore can basically make immigration policy. So, that's a significant issue. Again, the rules are there. We just need to have the rules enforced, and this process will go a whole lot more smoothly.
Well, we know that Stephen Miller has come out and said that he wants to see 3,000 people a day right now getting deported from this country. As a former federal immigration judge yourself, I know that there's more resources coming in the big, beautiful bill, but we're not there yet. So what are the current limitations that we have right now in this country to make those numbers a reality?
So back in 2012, my then colleague, John Morton, who was Barack Obama's first ICE director, estimated that ICE had the capacity to remove about 400,000 aliens per year. And, we could expand that by using military assets, by, enlisting the help of other federal partners to help ICE in its duties. But, at the tops, you're probably going to get to about 1 million people per year. The other part of that, though, the part that encourages people to leave by themselves without being ordered deported, is much more effective and will prove to be much more effective. Right now, I get calls from people all the time, questions asking me about, what's the likelihood that this person's going to be removed or that one. The word has gotten around in immigrant communities that people who are here illegally had better leave. And I think that, it's going to take a while. We're going to have to go through the numbers from the Census Bureau to figure out how many of those people have in fact left. But Jill, I think that's really going to be the much more impactful part of the Trump administration's policies. It's going to be those people who pack up, who have made their money, who go home. Not so much the number of people who are deported.
Andrew Arthur, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Chris Bedford right after this. We know that family farms are continuing to shut down, and it's not going to be from a lack of hard work, but it's all that meat in the grocery store. It's not coming from them anymore. It's actually coming from overseas, and you don't know what the quality is over there. The labeling, questionable at best, but you don't hear that in the headlines. But over 85% of the grass-fed beef that's sold in grocery stores right now is imported, and most shoppers have no idea. Good Ranchers doesn't just sell meat. They guide you back to the American ranchers, to real quality, to food that you can actually trust. Unlike imported meat, all the Good Ranchers products are 100% born, raised, and harvested right here from local family farms in the United States. And every order that you go through gets the people that have spent generations upholding the legacy of American ranching. And Good Ranchers has some of the best meat that you've ever had, and you can definitely taste the difference. Father's Day is coming up. They have their King Cut box, which makes a great gift. It has the thick cut ribeyes, the thick cut New York strips and fillets. It's a feast fit for a king. Your dad's definitely going to love this as a gift. So if you subscribe to any of the Good Ranchers boxes today, you'll get your pick of free meat for life. That includes, you can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or chicken wings in every box with a lifetime of your subscription. And if you use the exclusive code Jill at checkout, you get an extra $40 off. So visit goodranchers.com to shop American meat you can trust. Remember, use that promo code Jill for an extra $40 off. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Do you ever feel like liberals are studying conservatives like we're some rare jungle species? Like they have no idea what to do with us. Well, according to Chris Bedford's latest piece, Conservatives in the Midst, that's not too far off. So welcome, Chris Bedford, once again. Please walk us through, right, this liberal analysis of Trump's policies that you've highlighted in your latest Beltway brief, because it feels like they have absolutely no clue what to do with us and Donald Trump as a whole.
Yeah, you're right. So I was reading this interesting piece from a guy with just the perfect pedigree in foreign policy. And he wrote something that, was not going to be actually very popular with foreign policy's readers, which is that, hey, by the way, Donald Trump actually has a coherent policy. He's got ideas. He's got a plan, that there's actually something behind this. It's not simply chaos. And then if you walk through, he's not really wrong, but this is sort of things that are just rather obvious. So he says, first, Donald Trump wants a more conservative society. He wants law and order, and he puts this in quotation marks. He says so-called traditional values, as if values don't have tradition. He says, secondly, Donald Trump wants to remake the economy. So he takes kind of normally Republican policies like deregulating, lowering taxes, but he also adds trying to reshore American industry, which is something that, both parties, well, more Democrats actually previously have talked about than Republicans, but now it's been a major thing for Republicans for 9 years, 10 years. Then the third, he said that he wants a new political system, which where he's actually in charge of the executive branch. They keep on throwing out these things. Independent agencies, independent departments. It's completely ridiculous. They work for the executive branch. So that's a whole new political system, is having control over your executive branch. And then battling. How dare he battle with the courts and with Congress, which is actually really what the framers always envisioned, that there would be some jealous defense of power. Wouldn't it be nice if Congress occasionally jealously defended its power? And then fourth, he wants to change America's role in the world. Now, they say they're turning away from the global values and the global values-based system, which is just a bunch of nanny-panny for liberalism and globalism. And he's turning towards a foreign policy that says that you should essentially put the just interests of the United States first in all kinds of foreign policy decisions. Now, what amazed me about this piece is not that it's wrong. It's that it acted like it had found some kind of decoder, like it had found the Rosetta Stone. There's 77 million, I think, or more than that, was how many people in America voted for Donald Trump just in November. And they're decoding what conservatives believe, like they're Jane Goodall watching chimpanzees. It's gorillas in the mist time. They're watching like, they seem to structure their family unit around a mother and a father and then children. Every day they go to this strange pointy building, or every Sunday they go to this strange pointy building. We don't understand what goes on inside. It looks like some kind of sacred ritualistic behavior. They never talk to people. They don't do the reading. They're not reading the primary sources. The kind of ignorance you see of even just conservative political history is wild. Remember during the debates where Ron DeSantis accused Nikki Haley of moving forward with pale pastels and not bold colors? He kept on using that line. It was overdone, honestly. But that's a reference to Ronald Reagan's, a famous Ronald Reagan speech, that we must not move forward with pale pastel banners and copies of Democratic policy. We need to have bold banners and bold colors. The internet of left-wing political journalists who, let's say, do this for a living, erupted with people saying it was a sexist comment about her dress. How stupid could they be? And these are people who've been doing this for decades. So it shows you that they don't read the primary source documents. You can find Donald Trump's foreign policy and basically a whole huge aspects of his domestic policy in like the Sharon statement, an early National Review back before it went kind of wacky. You can find this all throughout. We can turn it to Blaze News tonight. You can listen to Glenn's show. You can learn so much about this stuff and not have to simply guess it like you're trying to decode things. And by the way, this guy, he's one of the smart ones who's actually trying to figure it out as opposed to just saying it's because we're stupid or racist.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon to watch. So you're really, if you are somewhat intelligent or care, you're not, a complete hack. You have to ask yourself this question if you're a liberal, because of who runs the world now and because of the results of the election, right?
Isn't this a great problem?
It's a wonderful problem for people to have. It's an invitation to learn, an invitation to evolve and grow mentally. But you also point out that how we get here post-World War II, the absolute dominance, right, of post-World War II liberalism has been apparent. I mean, this is why conservatism exists in the manner it does, a sort of a reaction by Buckley and others after the World War to say, this is ridiculous. People forget God and Man in Yale is written in the 1950s, and he's talking about how Yale is a bunch of godless communists then. And so I suppose that these people, if we're going to give them some benefit of the doubt, just grew up in a world that was so dominated by this stuff. Our friend Charles Kessler calls the last century, the liberal century, that they had no interaction in terms of what, education, elite social networks, etc.
Yeah, they feel like they're just the only, not just the dominant political force, which they honestly have been, to your point, to Charles's points, for a century, but they feel like they're the sole American tradition. If you went back, just like you were talking about, to right after World War II, the essential idea was that the only properly American political tradition that was real was liberalism. You could go back to the guys in Concord. You go Walt Whitman. You could go Henry David Thoreau. You could do up to John Dewey, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, obviously. These are people, this was supposed to be the only truly American idea. And conservatism, they understood, existed in Europe. There was conservatism, and they put that more along the lines of monarchists and people who wanted the church to rule, which still did exist quite a bit in the 40s. And there's still strains of it in Europe today. Or in America, they considered, if you were a conservative, you were a grandma who doesn't like rock and roll. It was more reactionary. It wasn't an actual coherent philosophy. And Russell Kirk, in his book, which, exactly to Charles's point, he wanted to call the conservative route, it ended up being called the conservative mind, was one of the key forces, along with others, in drawing together all these thinkers throughout history to illustrate that in America, in the founding, through men like John Adams and his son, you can trace a tradition that goes back to Edmund Burke, that goes back to London and common law, that goes back to Jerusalem, goes back to Rome and Athens. You can trace this idea that tradition matters, that men are spiritual creatures with spiritual needs, not simply material needs, that society is linked between the living, the dead, and the yet unborn, and we're all connected, and we're carrying that onward. You can link this, and he kind of put this to bed for a while. They were still winning, and Republicans were best described as controlled opposition. They really didn't push back on domestic policy. The Overton window was constantly moving every 4 years. How dare you talk about this? How dare you talk about that subject? How dare you talk about that thing we just changed? We saw it on absolute fast forward with COVID, with this trans insanity. I mean, people just had to stop paying attention after a while, because these experiments work better when you do it over 20 years, 30 years, as opposed to essentially overnight. None of this trans stuff was around when we started in our careers. So this is completely new stuff, and they've been exposed. There's been overreach. Honestly, I think that COVID itself may end up being a total blessing for the American people, because it exposed so much of how much is broken.
Well, Chris Bedford out there in his natural habitat, surrounded by built-ins. I don't know what we're going to do with you, Chris. I don't know if we can make out whatever this weird conservative thing you have going on out there right now.
Oh, yeah, they'll try to study us. They'll watch us. They got the ring cams peering through their windows, but I like to keep them on their toes.
You have to. Hey, thanks so much, Bedford. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
See you then.
Well, is communism in our future? Is it going to get any better? Don't worry. We'll have the answer for you right after this. There's a great one in the movie theaters now. There's a story about grit and redemption and old-fashioned family values. Some might actually call that conservative. It comes to you from Angel Studios. You know them from The Sound of Freedom and The King of Kings. Now they have The Last Rodeo. It's an action-packed story of a retired rodeo legend who straps back in for one last ride, risking it all to save his grandson. He's the oldest rider to ever enter the arena, and the movie is all about healing broken bonds and facing the past and proving that real courage means fighting for the people that you love, and it's raw and heartfelt. You're absolutely going to love it. Theaters are selling out fast, so go get your tickets now. You can go to angel.com/Jill to grab your seats for The Last Rodeo. Again, it's in theaters right now. Get your tickets at angel.com/Jill. That's angel.com/Jill. BlazeTV.com/Jill. One of the most common fears regarding AI is that it's all going to be putting us out of a job. Andrew Yang, his 2020 presidential campaign, came through and even promised universal basic income for employees replaced by machines. However, our next guest thinks this is a slippery slope towards top-down control from the government. Carol Roth joins us now to break this all down. She's a recovering investment banker and the author of You Will Own Nothing. So, Carol, this was all brought up by a post that you put out there on X, and you said that AI will be a catalyst for communism. So what do we have to fear? What kind of path are we looking towards in our future potentially?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, Jill, and I think we have a decision tree of different possible outcomes. But whether you think that there is an outcome where the software AI or physical AI in terms of robots come and take all of our jobs, or there it's just kind of this hyped up fear, I think that is going to be the catalyst for these increasing calls for communism. Whether it's happening or not, certainly, as you mentioned, UBI is going to be the first thing that gets amped up out of the gate, which is theoretically challenging since we've had so many pilot programs and derivative programs, things like the Biden bucks that came out of the Biden administration that caused all that inflation. We've seen this fail over and over again. And by the way, our government doesn't actually make any money, so pretty hard when you don't make any money to offer universal basic income. But I think that's going to be the first thing. And then depending on what happens and which route we go down, but if you start to see large chunks of people displaced at a time and the unemployment rate goes up, I do think that that's going to be a catalyst for questions about ownership. Why should these handful of tech companies be able to own all of the robots, and why should they be able to sell them, and shouldn't we all participate in the fruits of the labor of the robots, since we're not the ones who are actually going to be doing the labor anymore? So my fear is that one, that before anything even like that happens, that we'll start marching down that path, and we'll see that the usual suspects calling for types of things that limit freedoms, limit choice, a lot of collusion with tech, and even more calls for communism. And then, God forbid, we actually do start seeing this implemented, instead of thinking this, how do we actually make people benefit from this widely. I think that it will be pretty quickly a call for dictatorships, communism, something that is very anti-individual rights.
So this is a complicated matter, I know, but when I hear this, just at a big picture, I want to stay with the big picture for a second. I immediately think of this rising debate about regulating AI, and my instincts are to favor a lot of people who I consider more pals, the Andreessens of the world and the accelerationists who are sort of saying, look, and I agree with them, if you start regulating heavily, you're going to have woke AI. You're going to have, this being used by governments for centralized control. On the other hand, it certainly is a technology that's so powerful, it's akin to saying, nuclear weapons will be completely, unregulated. So how do you navigate that? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, these are the discussions that should be happening every single day at every single level. I want to address the first piece about woke AI. I read a tremendous Substack from, I think it's called Tree of Woe, that's arguing right now that, just as the left took over the culture in so many ways, from mainstream media to Hollywood to, so on and so forth, that they've actually done the same thing with AI, and that even Grok, the X platform AI is centrist at best, but most of them are very left-hand coded, and that if the right doesn't catch up, that with or without regulation, that we're already going to get very left-coded, very woke AI, and that's going to be foundational to the systems and architectures, which from there, as you can imagine, is going to create the environment, regardless of regulation, that is going to be very unfavorable. So I think even before we get to regulation, that's a very serious concern and something that we should be thinking about right now. In terms of regulation, while I'm normally a states' rights kind of person, I think that regulation at the federal level probably makes more sense, because the nightmare from both a business and an individual rights standpoint, trying to figure out and navigate a patchwork of all these different state AI regulations, I think would make it very difficult and make it almost impossible to compete with others. And then that's kind of where you get to, okay, well, let's preserve our individual rights in a digital area. The other thing, though, that is the sort of the competing thought here is that while we want to do the right thing here, you also have these bad actors all over the world, whether they be states or terror enterprises, that are also going to have access to AI that eventually is going to probably get to AGI, get to eventually super intelligence. So we also have to make sure that whatever we're doing that's protecting our rights doesn't put us at a disadvantage on the global stage, because that could impact not just our rights and our security. So this is a very, very difficult set of problems with lots of different outcomes. And I think we need many more intelligent people, and not just tech intelligent, but EQ type of intelligent people having these discussions and shaping the discourse and acting, which is something that we usually don't do. We're not very proactive as a people. We're usually very reactive. And I don't think that we have that luxury, because by the time that it gets here in the format that will create concerns, it will be too late. We need to be having these thoughts and discussions now.
Well, Carol, I'm glad that you went there, because it's where I wanted to take the conversation. Because if you're going to talk about regulation in the United States, sure, we can talk about that all day. But what is China going to do, and how is that going to impact this, and how on the global scale, right? That's where it's very difficult to go state by state when you are going to have nations who might not have the same kind of ethical rules that we will have. So how do you look at that as a framework when this is going to be a global issue that we're going to have to tackle?
Yeah, I think that you need to have individual rights focused people in that conversation, but also realizing the real pressures back from where this conversation started, from those who are seeking power and control to use the quote unquote crisis as the way to steal some of those rights and to create issues. And I'm imagining a situation that parallels, unfortunately, something like the COVID lockdowns, where you start having drones that have these capabilities, like we saw over the weekend with this attack from Ukraine and Russia. Imagine that you get bad actors that all of a sudden can now take down planes or, attack very specific targets within the United States. And then that all of a sudden becomes a call to be locked down and to have these secured areas because of AI. I think that we're going to really need to kind of play all these different options out to, go through the game theory on each of them, see what that looks like, and make sure that we're not in a position like we were in COVID, where there were so many individual rights violations, even with the larger context of perhaps, in this case, an actual real crisis going on.
Carol Roth, thanks so much, because I love what you said there. With everybody needs to be talking about this every single day. This moves so quickly that if we don't get our hands around this quickly, we are going to be in a world of hurt. Thanks so much for your time.
Always a pleasure.
MP, when you look at this, like she was saying, with COVID and whatnot, like, we don't want our backs up against the wall. We don't have to be forced into a decision. We want to do this while we still have the ability to change the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with what Carol is saying. We have to get ahead of it, and we're not ahead of it. And there's just a lot of discussions that need to be had, like she said. by more people in the game rather than just people in tech. And a lot of that is just educating people so they don't have a cartoonish view of what this is and sort of see its possibilities. And, this is something we have to get on top of. The administration is doing a good job of beginning those conversations, but there's a lot more that we've needed. And, I've suggested a national council on this just to start to educate people and to have some of these debates out. It shouldn't be like a rah-rah, though. We have some serious issues where there's unclear answers and forks in the road. Sooner we talk about them and start hashing things out, the better.
AI, is it going to lead to communism? Is that the ultimate place that this goes?
I mean, I think that there's multiple possible futures, but certainly she's right that the first thing anyone wants to do with a powerful tool is gather power onto themselves. And one of the ways to do that is through a communist approach where you tell everyone, you're going to give them everything and it's going to be fine. And in return, you just bow down to the AI god. This is an idol, right? It really can be an idol very easily. But there's other futures in which you have lots of societies using AI in different ways that are battling each other. And I think something that's more factional like that actually speaks to the founders, where you say, there's going to be like, let 1,000 flowers bloom here. Let's have more competition, however we can with AI and not centralized power. How possible is that? I mean, these are big questions that we're going to be battling out over the next few decades.
One thing we know for sure, Pride Month is an idol. We'll be breaking that down and how it goes into the NFL right after this. Well, it's been 5 years since the George Floyd riots out there in Minneapolis, and BlazeTV just dropped something that you absolutely have to see. Now, it's going to be the first time ever. There are 3 current Minneapolis cops. They're still in force. They're still in uniform, and they're breaking their silence about what really went down. And they were there with the 3rd precinct, and it was abandoned. It was burned. We remember the mostly peaceful protests. Now, they're speaking anonymously on camera to tell the truth about Derek Chauvin, Governor Walz, all the chaos that surrounded that event. And they say that Chauvin was set up. They said that Walz failed them. And they said that the city, actually, that they were sworn to protect, has now turned their backs on them. So you can actually go see the first 10 minutes for free on YouTube right now. Just search BlazeTV Minneapolis. But to see the full unfiltered investigation, you have to be a BlazeTV subscriber. So to do so, go to blazetv.com/BNT. Get $20 off your subscription. You can sign up and support unrelenting journalism and see what the media won't show you. It's blazetv.com/BNT. We thought this year, maybe it's different. No, nothing is safe from Pride Month, not even sports. But the good news is that only a few NFL teams changed their logo to virtue signal for this holiday. So I wrote on X that we're down to 3 teams on our way to 0. So what do you make of the NFL's representation of Pride Month? Jake answered the call. He said that they are making it very clear. It's obvious. They do not want you as a customer. They would prefer that you and people like you didn't watch or go to a game or spend money on their merchandise. I accepted this fact years ago. He says it's been 30 years since he's watched an NFL game. Now, that might be a stretch, MP. 30 years is a very long time. But the NFL, not virtue signaling to you and I.
No, I do know many people who actually took this to heart and decided the thing that they were going to do to sort of fight the wokeness was just drop sports. And that's there certainly are a lot of people like him, more than you'd think, who really got angry enough to say, no mas, I'm done.
Yeah, our friend Jesse Kelly, one of those guys, never watches the NFL anymore. And I can't believe it. Now, again, I said there were 3 teams. There are actually 4. MP, you are a huge Buffalo Bills fan, and we couldn't let them off the hook because this is the official Bills X account. Now, it was not flagged in our earlier posts, so they got out of like a lot of the criticism. Mm-hmm. But how does this make you feel looking at this? This is your team right here. Look at, they are celebrating Pride.
I don't know why you have to subject me to this pain on air in front of all these people, but it's painful. Look, I mean, this is awful. They've done this every year. It's absolutely ridiculous. What I really hate about it is how it trains everyone to just be used to what they're doing and not think about what this actually means. It's basically saying that aberrant forms of sexuality somehow have something to do with a football team. and should be, celebrated or lifted on high, which is a very strange thing in itself. But of course, what's really going on is this is tied to an agenda about a way of life and almost a religion when it comes to sexuality, and celebrations of cult forms of sexuality are very much part of the pagan universe, and it's just ridiculous though, because it has nothing to do with football. And I will say, I have quit a lot of things, right, because of this. I mean, I got rid of subscriptions and everything else, tried to build things that were aligned. What I have to say about this, and maybe I'm a complete hypocrite, maybe, but a lot of you out there who say you stop watching sports don't like sports anyway, right? So I still watch football because it's the one thing I do with my family, and one piece of entertainment I do, and it's once a week, and that's the only sport I watch. So we still do it. We've still gone to the games. And I give everyone one thing, like you get to keep when you have to quit all this stuff. So like for some people, it's like, well, they're going to keep their Disney subscription because they like whatever, or I'm going to keep HBO because I like this. I try to keep like one thing where I know I'm being a hypocrite, because it's hard to give up, mainly because of Josh Allen being good, but because it's like one thing we do as a family where literally everyone in our family loves to watch NFL football. So this is painful. It's ridiculous. And really, I admit that I should just walk away from the whole damn thing. But I do think it's lessening. I'm not sure, though, because you see what MLB did. Major League Baseball just said all of that, we're all gay. Like, it's all gay. It's all
Except for the Texas Rangers. They are still the lone holdout. So you know what? I went to one of those games and I was like, they could be my team. It's okay. I don't have an MLB team, but yes, I think based on this, it will be. Now, the Washington Redskins, they are always going to be the Redskins here on this show. They went and posted this on X. Now, they didn't change their logo. They thought that they were going to get sneaky around this. I will say this is probably an improvement based on previous years when all of the teams were changing all of their logos. But they're still trying to slide it in there and, have their cake and eat it too, MP.
No, the whole thing is ridiculous. I mean, imagine there is no demand for this, of course. This is actually a sort of woke mafia forcing their values, quote unquote, on the rest of the country. And it's disgusting. And the NFL really should be ashamed of itself for pandering, because they're not pandering. They're pandering to power. Make no mistake about this. The NFL is not doing, this is not a free market thing. They're not out there trying to get new market share or audience. They are pandering to power. They are licking the boots of people who are in cultural power by doing this, and virtue signaling to elites, and basically spitting on the rest of us.
Now let's wrap up our Pride Month talk with this, because Sesame Street is out there. You think the kids are going to be okay? No, it actually gets worse. Sesame Street posted this Pride Month message saying, "On our street, everyone is welcome. Together, let's build a world where every person and family feels loved and respected for who they are. Happy Pride Month." Again, everybody's like, you can be gay, just don't go after the kids. That's the number one thing. That's the number one rule that people have a problem with. And yet they say, oh, we're not trying to do that, except for now this is in a Sesame Street message.
Yeah, look, they think that their theory about sexuality, the theory of sexuality that they have, right, the sexologists, the God forbid the experts, is now somehow that everyone from the time they're born has one of a wide variety of sexualities. And, the problem that normal people have with that is, how do you know? How do you know that about children? And these people want to throw as many different kinds of sexualities, quote unquote, in front of kids as possible. And it shouldn't be tolerated. And I think most people do kind of get it, but this is still very strong. It's still all over the culture, and it's extremely disturbing, and it has to be fought.
Well, let's bring AI back into this discussion, because we were talking about the regulations and if it's going to be woke, right? Pride Month, is it going to be big in AI or not? It depends on who is making the rules. And that is such an important thing, because so much of our future, much like the world changed when the internet came along, we are going to have another revolution with AI.
Yeah, so you start this century. I mean, each medium, Marshall McLuhan, great media theorist, each medium sort of changes the entire way in which you sense and see the world, and it changes the way we think about ourselves. So, start with the telegraph. All of a sudden, you can communicate instantaneously across the country in short messages, sort of like, it's like Twitter through the airwaves. That changes a lot. That makes it possible for more communication from public officials. It changes the nature of national defense, et cetera. You start to throw in audio, and all of a sudden you have the rise of the powerful speakers who, leads to fascism in Europe. It leads to someone like FDR and his fireside chats being able to directly influence the people's minds. Presidents before mass media didn't even talk. They didn't even make a lot of speeches. I mean, Abraham Lincoln would make a few speeches a year. So it changes everything. AI is going to do that. So the first thing is what we talked about with Carol Roth today. Are you going to regulate this or not? It's so powerful, it's akin to nuclear weapons. So some kind of regulation is there. Whoever controls AI will control the world. Governments are going to be involved. On the other hand, the more you regulate it, the more you risk centralizing power, creating a kind of communist system like Carol talked about today, or enabling, some kind of all-seeing totalitarian eye. We don't want that either. So we do want private actors, right, duking it out with AI, but that's a complicated question. And then the deeper problem, and this is the one I just want to hit at the end of the show, is something that you all have to think about, or your kids have to think about, or their kids have to think about, which is every single medium that comes along all of a sudden, like whether it's TV, the rise of the internet and digital, dramatically impacts our understanding of ourselves, the way we think about the world, and everything else besides. It influences our habits in profound ways. AI is doing that right now, and there just aren't enough people thinking about how to use it properly. And there's some very bad scenarios in which this could go. On the other hand, AI is an incredibly powerful tool that could do some amazing things. So it's sort of up to us. Are we going to use AI to basically have a functionally illiterate society, which some would argue we already have? This is only going to make it worse. Kids can't read. They just use it to do everything in classes. Education is already breaking down, right? That's not a good scene. Or is AI going to lead to something that makes everyone more free and not enslaved by letting every family or individual, create things that are great for themselves and others? That's the future we got to think about now. And the important thing is that you start thinking about it in your own personal life and in regards to how you use it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, because we were all told once the internet came along, oh, everybody will have the information at their fingertips. People will be as smart as they have ever been. That doesn't really feel like the society that we're living in right now.
Right. This is what happens, right? There's always one side that says the technology is going to be great. Everything that's going to happen is going to be great. The internet will make us all geniuses. And there's the other side that goes, I think we're all retarded. I think this is idiocracy. I think we're getting dumber. And the truth is usually somewhere in between and a little bit complicated. But if you don't think about it, and if you don't have smart people thinking about it and testing it to see what works or not, you're going to have some bad things happen. It's like with the smart kids, smartphones and screens. The kids who just grow up on that with no regulation, they're going to have, basically brain damage the rest of their lives if they do that in an unrestricted way from the time they're young to the time they're 25. What's AI going to do? Well, good and bad things, but we got to use it for good.
I love the headline that I saw that they said, oh man, teachers are getting so fed up with kids trying to use AI to do all their homework. They're actually going to go back to pen and paper because they don't want all the plagiarism from AI out there. I think that's hilarious because you know what? If you're the kids, you're like, homework. Yeah, mom, it's done. I got nothing else.
I mean, they should have gone back to pen and paper earlier. I mean, yeah, come on. Yeah, I don't fault the kids.
They stopped teaching the kids cursive. Everything went downhill at that point in time. You know what? It's okay. We'll survive with AI or not. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
I bet you have.